Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Paris Air Show at the historic Le Bourget Airfield outside the French capital. Our coverage here is sponsored by L3 Technologies and Leonardo DRS, and we're honored to have with us Mike Strianese, who is the chairman and CEO of L3. Sir, thanks very much for spending some time with us.
It's great to see you, Vago. It wouldn't be a show without our typical interview, so thanks for coming by.
It's always a pleasure. We've had a lot of conversations about global environments, the business. Where I want to start is, what are some of the things that you guys are highlighting here? You know, every air show is an opportunity to highlight and feature new products. What are the things you guys are most proud of that you're unveiling here at this show?
Well, we have several aircraft on display. The Longsword is one of them, which is an ISR, weaponized ISR platform for sale primarily to international customers, although it will be offered in a U.S. competition that's coming up later on this year. We also have our Spider ISR aircraft, which was based loosely on the Project Liberty aircraft that we delivered to the Air Force many years ago. And again, it's a very affordable solution for many international countries that need the ISR capability, but not necessarily in the grand scale that they can come in. So it's an affordable aircraft that most countries can afford and deploy for border, critical infrastructure protection, etc. It really does a lot.
The Longsword Air Tractor was here a couple of years ago, very agricultural aircraft, but they got very interested in getting into the counterinsurgency space for a heavily armed aircraft that can operate in more permissive environments. Mm-hmm. What are some of the opportunities you're pursuing? And talk to us about why you think this airplane is the right airplane for some applications for the U.S. Air Force.
You know, the customers that are interested in it, are, as you mentioned, are areas where there's insurgencies. It has state-of-the-art sensors. It has the L3 Westcam EOIR sensor, which is state-of-the-art, as well as L3 data links to make it a very robust ISR platform. In addition, it has some traditional weapons on it. I don't know if I can name them all, but like Hellfires, etc. We can see them all hanging from the wings back here.
It's a very lovely model.
It's a lovely model, and again, it's for areas where it's more of a permissive environment, as you said. It can stay high enough so it's out of harm's way, and it's a very robust aircraft, so it really can get the job done in those environments. So on the U.S. side, they're looking for there'll be some tryouts. I would characterize it as for a light attack aircraft, and this will be one of them that we will be displaying. If I'm not mistaken, we'll actually have two entrants in that game, which is unusual for us because we're not an airplane company. We don't make the airplane, we just make it better.
As you said, it's pretty extraordinary to have two airplanes in the competition. Can you tell us what the second competitor is going to be at this point?
I can't at this moment, Vago, but it'll give us something to talk about in the near future.
All right, that's a deal. I'll come up from Washington to see you in New York, to New York for that one. Over the years, we have spent a lot of time talking about the global environment as well as the domestic environment. I remember during the budget downturns, you were one of the people who was saying, look, you saw it a little bit earlier, I think, than some people were seeing it, including some of the depth and some of the adjustments that industry had to make to stay ahead of that. As you look at the global picture now, but also the U.S. domestic picture, I mean, it was at the Reagan Forum, for example, where everybody was talking about Reagan-level buildups, and you were one of the people saying, look, I don't know, there's going to be a lot of competition for this money. That was a Lindsey Graham message as well that was being delivered. Talk to us about how you see the global environment and how you guys are going to have to adapt in order to be able to continue to succeed in that environment.
Well, as the U.S. Environment starts to take shape, which it really hasn't yet, because the budget is just coming together, and so are some of the jobs in the Pentagon. Internationally, there's been a call from this administration to provide more defense spending so that it's more of a balanced approach between the United States and our allies, and that I would anticipate will involve sale of more U.S. systems, for one, to meet that requirement, but two, for interoperability, because obviously that's desirable when you're going to fight together, and that is kind of the plan, is to be interoperable with our allies. So whether it's sensors or comms, those are areas that come to mind as ones where you'd like to see interoperability, and that's where we expect to see growth. So we are dealing with adjusting where we need to, so our products are export qualified. Sometimes we design it for export. Sometimes we need to modify U.S. products for export when necessary, so that they're interoperable in the particular country where we're going to be marketing, and they work with other products that are already in that domain. But yes, there are some adjustments that will be made. But we're very much looking forward to the environment of growth, which we haven't seen for quite some time. So it's an exciting time for the industry.
So as you look at what the growth projections are, I mean, there are folks who look at it and say, look, the mark, we were just talking about that, right? The difference between the marks, 640 billion is what one committee is looking at as a starting point. Others are looking at a much lower number, 570. You were talking about budgetary uncertainty. I mean, every year there were projections and numbers and the Budget Control Act caps. From your standpoint, how much growth do you see in our budget, as you guys look at what's happening? What are you projecting as to what you think the growth is going to be so that you build a stable plan? Obviously there's going to be the OCO budget that's going to go up and down, and that's going to be a cushion a bit on it. But what's your projection on where you think the budget's going to be going?
Well, from an overall standpoint, I can look back to the days right after 9/11 and the beginning of Iraq, Afghanistan, where the company L3 was growing at about 8 to 10%, which is kind of in line with the rest of the industry. So when you take whatever the budget growth is, both domestically and internationally, and translate it into company numbers, that's where everyone was landing. And I would certainly be happy to see that growth rate return. So it's a healthy rate where a company can afford to invest what's necessary to invest for tomorrow's systems, and to invest in technologies that are needed. As you know, the United States has fallen behind a bit in technology and some of the countermeasures that are needed to meet some of our adversaries' advancements over the last 8 years. So, there's a lot of work to get done. You've heard of the term the third offset strategy, which, calls for some more technology to match and return the U.S. to the technology advantages that we used to have. And there's a lot that needs to be done. So there's no shortage of challenges right now.
One of the things you mentioned was this hope that there's going to be greater exports. Other CEOs have said the same sort of thing. But there are a couple of prominent analysts who've looked at this and said, look, an American first policy by the United States could also end up backfiring, that when these guys spend more money and are being urged by Washington, they're going to spend more money, but they may decide to spend it on their own domestic contractors instead of going into international. Is that a concern you have as a company that's been working so hard to grow your international footprint?
It really isn't, Vago, because we kind of anticipate that, and the offerings that we have are not readily available internationally. So we look for the spaces that we can fill where there is, an unmet demand, and whether that's night vision or secure comms or EOIR sensors, even airport security equipment. The products that we offer are just not matched by international competitors, point for point. And we believe we deliver a superior solution that really has its own place and is really not in a space that it's going to be overshadowed by an international offering. So.
Let me take you to airport security. That's a key market for you guys. Mm-hmm. You've been investing a lot of money in it. You've been a leader. You now have the 3D. You guys do a lot of the back-end baggage scanning. Mm-hmm. Now you're getting more into the carry-on bags with the 3D technology you guys have. Talk to us a little bit about what that business looks like and how you're going to adapt and are continuing to adapt. Years ago, we talked about this. Mm-hmm. As the threats continually are changing, whether it's the types of fluids, types of gels, and things like that. Talk to us about the overall market, but also how you're continuing to adapt and where you think that technology is going in a couple of years so that you guys can maintain that position you have, which is one of the leaders in this industry.
Sure, Vago. First of all, we recognize the problem at the checkpoints in the airports being the long lines, and the screening process, as you know, relied on the operator to use essentially a magnetometer that detected metals and an X-ray where they could see what's in a bag but still need to figure out whether it belongs there or not, and that involves going through bags by hand. We relied on the technology that's used in the check baggage, which is a CT scan that uses algorithms to determine whether there's an energetic material, if you will, in a bag, and will alarm the bag, and then the operators can go through it and decide whether something needs to be removed or not. So bringing more automation to the checkpoint, we hope, will alleviate the lines and provide for much better detection and a much safer environment. Then you asked about the evolving threats. Well, we like to develop machines that have the ability to be upgraded for current threat environments, and that's an ever-changing world. We stay close with our customers, and when there are changes and the machines need to be updated to accommodate those changes, we're able to do that. So, as you know, it's critical to stay very close to the customer and what the current threat environment is, so that the machines operate optimally.
In order to be able to maintain your position in this, you guys have made some acquisitions in the space. I'd like you to talk about that, but also to talk about how years ago we were talking, and you were saying that the future of this is actually interlinking the intelligence feeds, the passenger information, along with the scanning into an integrated security picture, as opposed to just necessarily saying, hey, look, here's the X-ray machine, or here's, the background checking procedures and things like that.
Absolutely correct. An integrated passenger picture, if you will, gives the operators a much more high-def view, if you will, of the traveler and what their background is and what's in the bags and everything, so they can make better decisions. So a networked solution is really where we have always been looking and where we're getting right now. As you know, we've made several acquisitions at the end of last year. One of them was Implant Sciences, which brought some additional capabilities to us in terms of sensors to do better detection, and also a company called McDonald Humphreys, which brings a level of automation to the checkpoint. So where the operators of today don't really have the data that could tell them when a particular checkpoint is not performing well. So remember, it's not just airports and it's not just terminals. We're talking about every line and every terminal and every airport. So it's quite a broad points of presence, if you will, that the operators need to be watching. But it'll give them the metrics they need so they can tell whether a particular line at a terminal is not passing enough passengers through because the machine's not calibrated correctly. There's too many false alarms. The operators need better training, but it'll help them. It'll give them the data to help them manage much more efficiently, and that's really what we're looking to do, with the goal of making the experience in the airport much better than it is today in terms of waiting on lines. And we're going to be getting into vacation season soon this year, and we'd like to have a marked improvement, if you will. Now, I know the administration's been talking a lot about infrastructure, and I've been very much vocal in terms of encouraging infrastructure to include airports, and not just airports, but the checkpoints and the security situation in the airports. It's all part of the infrastructure question. And the goal, of course, is to improve life for the traveling public while increasing security. So that's where we are. That's our thought process.
Well, look, I mean, it's an extraordinary system. I mean, as somebody who travels a lot, it's amazing that many people are moving around the way that we are, and ultimately, there is inconvenience and there are lines, but ultimately, it's to make sure that nothing wrong happens. Let me bring you back around to DoD with two last questions, because I know you're really busy at the air show here on the first day. It's another tradition that I'm glad that we've kept going. The first is, as you look, you were the chairman of Aerospace Industries Association, the voice of the American aerospace industry. You're on the board of governors and an important voice on that. AIA, under Dave Melcher, President Melcher, has been doing a great job in sort of highlighting issues, giving opinions, making endorsements. You all met recently for your twice a year you guys get together for your big sort of strategy powwows. This is something that you've spoken about over the years. So as the new administration is working to set its plans up, what are some of the good ideas from the past that you think they ought to consider for the future to hold on to them? There are some things that Secretary Mattis is maintaining. Innovation Initiative is something that he's maintaining and doubling down on, you could argue. Third Offset is something that remains important. And Deputy Secretary Work, that was his key project, and it looks like that's also going to be continuing. What are things from the past in terms of acquisition reform or policy or approaches, industry outreach that you liked? And what are some new ideas that maybe this new team can consider as they get underway? Obviously, Pat Shanahan, the former senior Boeing exec, who looks like he's going to be the next Deputy Defense Secretary.
Right. Well, of course, innovation is key. And in order for companies to invest and be able to achieve innovative solutions, we have to have the funds to be able to do that. And when we were under the pressures of the BCA and the shrinking budget, it was very hard to shake those dollars loose for investment. And I think that the people in the Pentagon have finally come to understand the pressures we face as public companies, and we need to deliver financials. Otherwise, we end up with all kinds of problems with shareholders and activists and the like. And so we're caught between a Pentagon looking to save money and an investment community looking to see higher margins. And we need to find the right balance. And I think we're getting there. Part of it is an acquisition reform to take some of the regs that really don't deliver much for the money and get them out of the way, whether it's specialty metals or there's a list of them. I don't need to go through them all, where the defense industry seemed to be the guinea pig when they first roll these out. Let's try it on defense companies first. And, it ends up making things cost more money. And I think that appreciation has finally been achieved at the Pentagon and in Congress, and they're working on lightening up on some of those. The export restrictions have been looked at, where items that are available internationally should not be restricted by the U.S. for export, because the extra sales volume that they would generate helps us all. It helps the volumes to keep our factories running efficiently, and it keeps our prices down. It absorbs overhead. So I think it's good for industry and it's good for our customers. So collectively, those are some of the things that we're still advocating. And key is some of the R&D rules that are going into effect now, where companies need to either get a sponsor or someone that's behind the R&D efforts. Now, I do support the fact that the customer, the DoD in this case, should know what industry is spending, so there's not duplication of effort and they're not paying for the same things twice. So I appreciate their goal. We have the same goal within our companies. But on the other hand, putting too much red tape in the R&D process could cause companies to shy away from leaning forward, if you will, if they end up with cost disallowances and the like. So I think the right balance needs to be struck there. It works best for us in industry if we have a clear understanding of what our customers need and where they would like to see us invest. We're more than happy to make those investments if we know they'll lead to products that will likely be sold. I don't think it serves anybody where we're investing in things that are kind of very speculative and may or may not be things that are actually needed. And it's a much more efficient path to go down together with our customers to develop those solutions that they really need. And I think that dialogue has improved over the years, and I think that there's enough focus on it that it'll continue to improve. And that's something I'd like to stay active with, and we do that regularly, have conversations before we invest that first dollar and make sure we're on the right page with our customers. And it's a good way to operate.
The administration is working hard to staff up, but some of these staff jobs have been a little bit hard to fill. From your perspective, given that getting contracts cleared, getting programs started, all of that involves a lot of the political leadership in the department. Is that a concern for you if some of these jobs aren't filled? And if they're not filled, what are the potential implications for defense companies like yours?
Well, of course, we'd like to see them filled by the most qualified individuals that can be found. Which would mean dollars get put on contracts sooner, the contracts are of a good quality, competitions are done well, and we all get an answer that we like. So, yes, it's a concern that some of the positions are not filled yet, but I know the administration is working on it, and I expect it to be done shortly, as is General Mattis, by the way, who himself is quite a powerhouse and could probably get a lot done on his own. I mean, he is one tough operator. But I think that given some of the areas that are behind, such as readiness, we're very concerned that gets addressed sooner rather than later. And those are areas that for us at L3 are very important because it touches two significant business areas for us. One is the readiness of equipment, whether it's the reset, getting the rotary wings, getting aircraft, getting ground vehicles reset to their state before they were deployed, but also training and the pilot training. We've made an investment in not only the simulators, but the actual pilot training service. So, for example, our commercial customers are coming to us to buy training by the hour. Believe it or not, they'd rather do that than buy the simulator and provide the actual trainer. And it's a good example of us taking a business we know well, simulation and training, and wrapping a couple of acquisitions around it that transform that business to the next level, which is providing power by the hour, as I like to call it, but training to address this shortage of pilots that we're facing now. And it's both in the commercial space and in the Pentagon space. There is a significant shortage, and we'd like to be part of that solution and be able to provide rapid training solutions to get the best pilots fielded. So now I think that filling those boxes on the org chart in the Pentagon and getting these areas addressed sooner rather than later will get us closer to the solution we're looking for as a country. It's good for industry. It's also good for the Pentagon and the warfighter is to be ready and to have the right equipment. So that's something that we're hoping gets addressed in the short run right now.
I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but in the downturn, you were making investments in technology, investments in people. What do you think are going to be the key areas of investment for you guys, and where do you expect to be in 5 years' time? Because recently you celebrated your 20th anniversary. You guys were very proud of the 20% return you guys have made in that 20 years since the company was launched. What are sort of the key initiatives, key technologies, key markets for you as you go into the next 5 years, and where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
Great. Well, we're looking at areas where L3 can prime. Obviously, while we think we can, if we put our minds to it, we can get most things done, we're not going to be entering the market as an aircraft OEM. That is, I think, a bridge too far. However, we are able to modify, missionize most any aircraft and make it into a problem-solving, missionized aircraft that customers need. And we've done that well time and time again. So, one, we are more and more looked at as a prime by our customers to solve their problems. Number two, there's areas, or white space, if you will, like undersea, where we think will grow not much differently than the UAVs grew going back 10 or 15 years, where it started very small and it became a huge business with thousands and thousands of platforms deployed. Well, we've made the investments in the undersea space now. We've bought a UUV. We've bought a company that provides a mission power module for it. And what's missing now is the conversations with our customers that will tell us what they would like the payload to do. What mission are they trying to solve? And you can imagine there's a lot of them, whether it's mine interdiction or ISR, et cetera. Customers have a long wish list there, and we're following their lead on what they would like. So, we have the building blocks we need to provide a state-of-the-art solution, and it's an area where L3 can prime. Same thing on the space area, where the movement has been away from the large multi-billion-dollar satellites to a more distributed network of satellites, smaller sats, where if you lost one or two, you can reconfigure that constellation and still provide the capability, whether it's GPS or surveillance or the like. As you know, some of our adversaries have the ability to disrupt the satellite. So, if you have all your eggs in one basket, you can lose an entire capability by losing a single satellite. So going to a distributed model is something that we fully support, as our customers do. And it's an area that we're able to provide the payload as a payload prime. It'd be nice to have the bus to put the payload on. This way we could be the prime. So we're looking at areas in that fashion where we could prime more. Again, we've taken a lot of businesses, whether it's the airport security, EOIR, night vision, and through a core technology and a couple of very well-placed strategic acquisitions, have built these businesses into billion-dollar areas that are one or two in their space. And we've done that over and over again, and we'd like to continue to do that more. I mean, it's a model that works for us. We've been able to prove that we can take a technology into the number one or two space with some modest investment and understanding what a customer requirement is. And it does provide the right level of operations to fund technology through R&D and the like. So, as the next 5 years roll around, I think there will be more areas like undersea or the airport security space where we'll continue to grow and be broader and look to be the leader in defining that market space. And I'm sure more will be evolving as we continue. Secure comms is very important. Operating in a GPS-denied environment is very important. And these are all areas that we're focusing on.
And we can expect more M&A, and do you think the M&A environment is going to become hotter and more permissive?
Yes, I do. I think there's plenty of properties out there that meet the mission that we are looking to fulfill. And, I mean, we've just done 3 or 4 acquisitions in the $100 million space, if you will. So it's been no bet the ranch type of deals in the multi-billion-dollar area, and it's been nothing so small that it's the sub-$100 million area. But it's right in the sweet spot that we are comfortable with and our investors like to see, in that, the $100+ million bolt-on acquisition is the ones that, we can do all day and build out these business areas, and it makes sense for us.
I'm getting the hook, but in 10 seconds, do you think the government's going to change its view of the deals that it's willing to allow? The last administration was a little bit cautious in sort of clearing some M&A deals. Do you think that there's going to be more? Do you have any indication on what the new team is going to be, how they're going to be thinking about this?
Well, my own take on it, spin on it, if you will, is the president has been very vocal on liking competition. So I would say any large transaction that would lessen competition may be frowned upon. But the areas where we're operating, again, in the $100 million neighborhood of bolt-ons, I don't see as threatening competition in any way. And these transactions do get that kind of review, but we have not run into any problems operating at that level. Now, if you're operating in the multi-billion-dollar areas where there are overlaps, I could certainly see some scrutiny coming to play, but not for areas where we're thinking about right now.
Mike, thanks very much for being so generous with your time, and have a great air show.
My pleasure. Thanks, Vago. As always, it's a pleasure to chat with you, and best of luck during the show.
Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you.